What is up, Bears fans? Welcome to the Chicago Bears Huddle podcast with me, your host, Owen James, channel that brings you all your latest Bears news. Guys, we're going to talk some Chicago Bears. Obviously, OTA is done, minicamp upcoming. What's next? What's next for the Bears in this exciting off-season? Look, I think, we all know that you can sign all the players in the world that you want. You can talk all the positives about the draftees that you want. But there's a number of topics I think that still need to be looked at and still need to be addressed. I mean, is this roster complete? I don't think so. I think there's still some weaknesses in certain key positions around the roster. I think if you look at the edge rusher position, I think that although we do have Montez Sweat and Dio Adeyingbo, who else is there to come in? There's been talk of Trey Hendrickson as a possible trade candidate. So, that could be a possible. But, that is, again, a position I do think the Bears still need to look at. The running back room, I think a lot of Bears fans, a lot of NFL analysts, that's not easy to say, guys, NFL analysts, do kind of say that is still a weakness for the Bears, something they need to address. Remember, guys, this is your UK take on our Chicago Bears. Please obviously smash that sub. Right, so look, let's start off with the running back room, shall we? Now, there's obviously Roschon Johnson. There's Carmen Ongai. There's Ian Wheeler, who obviously wasn't at OTAs. That's, I think, because he's still in the process of rehabbing from that injury. And there's D'Andre Swift. Now, apparently D'Andre Swift looked absolutely fantastic in these OTAs. He looked phenomenal, I think was the word that was used, which is positive, massively positive. But again, like I said, it is football in shorts, and you've got to remember that. And everybody has a plan. Everyone looks good until you get smacked in the face, and then you have to come up with a real solution to that. And can the Bears do that? There's hope, I think, that, with D'Andre Swift, with Roschon Johnson, with Carmen Ongai, that the Bears can put together something resembling a running game. But, I think there is a real need that if this offense is going to be effective for that running game to get going, that Ben Johnson, has a history, doesn't he? If you go back to his time in Detroit with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs of having that 1-2 punch at running back, does he feel he's got that with D'Andre Swift and another, whether that's Roschon Johnson or, of course, the rookie Kyle Monongai. Kyle Monongai, obviously, is someone who has been very highly talked about since his draft selection, and people have watched his tape and been very impressed with it. But as a number of people have said, that's college football. College football, NFL football, absolutely vastly different. So, look, there's options there. But, I think there's still talk of the Bears possibly moving for a running back, somehow going to look at a free agent running back, someone like a JK Dobbins, for example, seems to be another a name that has come up yet again. Obviously, JK Dobbins is currently with the Los Angeles Chargers, has an unrestricted free agent tender on his name, which apparently will lapse once training camp begins. Now, I don't think the Bears would make any move in the running back position yet until training camp. Why do I feel that's the situation? Well, of course, I think, if you look at the present situation with the cap space is around $10.5 million at this moment in time. It's not going to get any bigger at this moment in time unless certain things take place. Now, I think if the Bears wanted to create cap space to go and get somebody else, to add somebody else to this roster, then they would have to start to do some restructures. Maybe even look at some cuts as well. Now, you look at, obviously, the top wage earners there. Montez Sweat, obviously the highest paid Bear, in the organization on $25 million. You've got, of course, there DJ Moore, $24.9 million. You've got Jalen Johnson on $21 million, Tremaine Edmonds on $17.4 million. Joe Tooney's contract has obviously just been renegotiated, which has created a small amount more money. Jonah Jackson on $14.75 million, Drew Dalman on $13.6 million. They're unlikely to be restructured given the fact they've just been signed. Cole Kmet on $11.6 million and D'Andre Swift on $9.3 million. So, it is a situation that you've got to look at that and think, well, could that be restructured? Could some of that money be moved into signing on bonuses? Could that be moved around? Could that money be moved down the road further? And I think that would be certainly something the Bears would need to do if they were going to move for a JK Dobbins, for example. And I'm sure that Ryan Poles has already started to look at that. I'm sure that's something that, that he is kind of wanting to address, wanting to look at. I think, one of the players that they've talked about a restructure on is Jalen Johnson, moving his money, perhaps moving some of that into a signing bonus, and moving some of that money out of the actual cap, to actually create a bit of space in there. The other one, of course, that they've kind of looked at is Tremaine Edmonds. Now, Tremaine Edmonds is someone who comes from a winning franchise. He came from the Buffalo Bills, knows how to win. Now, I think arguably has not been as impressive in Chicago as of yet. Will be a free agent, at the end of the 2026 season. He's still under contract for this season and next, but then will be a UFA in restricted free agent in 2027. So he's got 2 years left on his deal. Now, could this be a situation where the Bears look to extend him, move his money down the line, transfer some of it into a signing on bonus, all to create some cap space? Again, I think this is something that, that Ryan Poles will definitely be considering. There are two, I think, kind of scenarios we're looking at with this movement that could well come with this movement of money around to create cap space. Like I said, through restructures, could even come through cuts, of course. I mean, I don't think realistically, like some people have talked about, that they're going to cut cut DeAndre Swift or trade him. I don't think they're going to trade Cole Kmet either. I think both are here for at least the next season. So, I think you've got a situation where that money will have to be found through those savings, through those restructures. Jalen Johnson, DJ Moore, for example, Montez Sweat, maybe. All those deals that could be removed, renegotiated and sorted out to create that cap space. But let's face it, GMs do it all the time. NFL teams do it all the time. I think, personally speaking, given the noises that have come out of the Bears this offseason, that this is not a 5-year project. This is not a 4 to 5 year project. This is a 5-month project. This is a win now project. This is let's go out there and let's go from worst to first. That's kind of been the noises that have come from Ben Johnson and his coaching staff. And I certainly think as well, if you look at that coaching staff, this is probably the best coaching staff the Bears have had in an awful long time. With the likes of Bieniemy, Dan Rauschar, Declan Doyle, Dennis Allen, obviously, and Ben Johnson. So, maybe that some of those guys will maybe pilfered at the end of this next season. Likes of Eric Bieniemy, for example, taken back to an OC role, for instance. So, I think there is an element there that this is kind of a win now kind of season. So I think given that, I think there is a real opportunity there. And I think there's a real chance that, as we approach training camp, as we get closer to training camp, that some of those restructures do take place. I don't think, like I said, that there'll be a lot of these players traded away. I think a lot of the core of this team are here and here for the long run. The Cole Kmets, obviously the draft guys, the Carson Lovers, Luther Burdens, the Caleb Williams, the DJ Moores, the Roma Dunzes, certainly those guys, and Roma Dunze, obviously, who's massively impressed in practice. But I think, this is a strong chance. And I think, if that happens, then, it certainly could be a situation that we look at the running back position. Like I said, JK Dobbins is a name that has come up again in link to the Bears, that people have sort of said that the Bears are looking at someone like a JK Dobbins to add to the backfield, and that that Ben Johnson wants to still have that 1-2 punch, and perhaps feels that he hasn't got a guaranteed 1-2 punch there at this moment in time. Roschon Johnson has his benefits, but perhaps is not seen as being that strong second running back behind DeAndre Swift or ahead of DeAndre Swift. Carmen Ongai, is a rookie, a guy we don't know. We could get the fact that he comes in and is an absolute superstar, whereas we could get him, he comes in and is an absolute failure. We don't really know on that one. The edge rusher position is another one that is then open for discussion. In the Trey Hendrickson situation, Trey Hendrickson is saying that he will not play next season for the Bengals if he doesn't get a new contract. I think there is an element there that if the Bears did want to trade for Trey Hendrickson, they would have to have a new deal in place if that new deal, is going to be forthcoming, and the money that Hendrickson wants. I think, Hendrickson will want somewhere in the region of 18.5 mil a year, at least. That's to start off negotiations. It could even climb as high as 20. The Bears are going to have to create a great deal of cap space, which, like I said, will have to come through restructures. And the question is, can they create enough? It's also the price. Is Ryan Poles willing to pay the price? Is he willing to pay perhaps a second and a late round pick for Trey Hendrickson? Is he willing to put that money out, those picks out there? I think, to me, there's an element that he isn't, because I think there is an element, with this team, that they are trying to build for the future as well as build for the now. They're trying to get younger. They're trying to build a young core to this roster that will be here for a number of seasons. So I don't see the Hendrickson trade as actually being something the Bears will look at as we approach training camp. And certainly it seems to have gone very quiet. In recent times, I've heard that the San Francisco 49ers are allegedly interested in Trey Hendrickson to play opposite Nick Bosa. So, I think there's a number of options out there for the Bears. But I do think that something will be done close to training camp. I do think there will be some restructures put into place. And I do think there may be a name or two added to the roster, a veteran name added to the roster. Guys, let me know, as my dog shakes himself while stood next to me. Thanks for that. Guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching the Bears Huddle podcast. If you've enjoyed the content, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Hey guys, let's bear down. Catch you later, Chicago.